The night started like any other. I was lounging on the couch, absently scrolling through my phone, lost in the usual mindless distractions, when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. A glance at the clock told me it was past midnight, way later than I expected. But I knew who it had to be. My wife, Sarah, returning from her latest business trip. Sarah traveled for work pretty often, so this wasn't out of the ordinary. What was strange, though, was the tone of her messages while she was away. She had been unusually cheerful, almost giddy. It wasn't like her. Normally, she'd complain about long meetings, delayed flights, and how exhausting these trips were. But this time, she sounded like she was having the time of her life. The front door swung open, and there she was, standing in the doorway with her suitcase in one hand and her phone in the other. Her face was practically glowing, her expression brimming with a joy I hadn't seen in years. She laughed at something on her screen, completely oblivious to my presence for a moment. I watched her closely, my stomach tightening with an unfamiliar feeling. At first, I tried to convince myself that maybe she just had a good trip, maybe something had gone right for once, maybe she had received good news from work. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice bright and bubbly as she kicked off her heels. "You won't believe how crazy this trip was. The meetings were endless, but we crushed the presentation. It's going to be huge for the company." I gave her a small nod and a forced smile. "That's great, Sarah. Sounds like it went well." "It really did," she gushed, still grinning as she tapped away at her phone. "Oh, and the food at this place they took us to? Unreal. Like, Michelin star level. I swear I've never had anything like it." I studied her as she rambled on, her energy almost too much, like she had been buzzing on some secret excitement. And then there was her laugh, a light, carefree sound I hadn't heard from her in years. It wasn't the tired chuckle she gave me at the end of a long day. It was something else, something I couldn't place. For a brief second, a sharp pang of jealousy hit me. Not because she was happy, but because I wasn't the one making her feel that way. I got up and walked over, wrapping my arms around her in a light hug. "You seem really happy," I said, half joking. "Maybe I should send you on more business trips." She laughed again, but this time, there was something off about it. A slight nervousness. "Yeah, maybe," she said quickly, pulling away to grab her suitcase. "I'm just going to unpack really quick." As she headed toward our bedroom, an uneasy feeling settled in my gut. Maybe it was the way she avoided my gaze, or the way she clutched her phone like it held something precious. Whatever it was, something about her didn't sit right with me. And then, suddenly, the house went silent. The laughter, the excitement, it was all gone. My curiosity got the better of me, and I moved toward the bedroom, my footsteps light on the carpet. As I reached the door, I heard her muttering under her breath. "No, no, no," she whispered, her voice panicked. "This can't be happening. Not now." I froze. Peeking inside, I saw her sitting on the edge of the bed, her suitcase open in front of her. She was clutching a small piece of paper, her fingers trembling. Her face had drained of all color, the joy from earlier completely wiped away. Whatever was on that paper, it had rattled her to her core. "What's wrong?" I asked, stepping into the room. Sarah flinched at the sound of my voice, her hands moving quickly to shove the paper back into her suitcase. "Nothing," she said, her laugh forced, brittle. "Just work stuff." I raised an eyebrow. "Work stuff? You look like you just saw a ghost." She shook her head, snapping the suitcase shut with a little too much force. "I'm fine," she insisted, standing up and brushing past me. "I'm just tired. I'll tell you about it tomorrow, okay?" And just like that, she was gone, disappearing into the bathroom before I could press her further. The door clicked shut, leaving me standing there, my mind spinning. Something was wrong. I didn't know what, but I could feel it deep in my bones. And I wasn't going to let it go. The second I heard the shower turn on, I knew I couldn't just let this go. Something inside me, a gut feeling I couldn't ignore, was screaming that Sarah was hiding something. That paper she had clutched like her life depended on it. Whatever was on it had shaken her to the core. And the way she shut me down, rushing out of the room like she couldn't get away fast enough, it didn't sit right with me. I stared at her suitcase, still sitting there on the bed, taunting me. I had never been the kind of guy to snoop. Trust had always been the foundation of our marriage. But at that moment, trust wasn't enough. I had to know. With shaky hands, I slowly unzipped the suitcase. At first glance, it looked like nothing was out of the ordinary. Clothes folded neatly, toiletries stuffed into one side. But then, as I dug a little deeper, I found something that made my stomach twist into knots. Tucked beneath her clothes was a small, elegantly wrapped gift box, tied with a deep red ribbon. There was no tag, no name, and the second I laid eyes on it, I knew it wasn't meant for me. My heart pounded as I carefully undid the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in soft tissue paper, was a sleek black lingerie set, far more provocative than anything she had ever worn for me. My mouth went dry. I just sat there, staring at it, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to answer. Why would she bring this on a business trip? Who was it for? Then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife even deeper, I noticed a small card tucked into the delicate fabric. I pulled it out with trembling fingers and flipped it open. There, in Sarah's handwriting, were 5 words that made my entire world tilt on its axis. For when we're finally alone. My breath hitched. There was no way to spin this, no way to explain it away. This wasn't just some innocent misunderstanding. This was evidence. Cold, undeniable proof that my wife, my Sarah, was cheating on me. I clenched the card in my fist, a wave of nausea washing over me. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. Who the hell was we? I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I needed more. Shoving everything back exactly as I had found it, I zipped the suitcase shut and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. But my hands were still shaking as I grabbed my phone and opened the browser. If she was hiding something, I needed to find out just how deep this went. I logged into our shared phone account, my fingers moving faster than my brain could process. I had never looked through her call logs before, never had a reason to. But as the list of numbers popped up on the screen, my stomach sank. There were dozens of calls to a number I didn't recognize. Some of them lasted minutes, others went on for nearly an hour. And they happened every single day she had been on that trip. Sometimes multiple times. My blood ran cold. Copying the number, I pasted it into a reverse phone lookup site. I watched as the search processed, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then the result popped up. Ethan Reynolds. I didn't recognize the name. He wasn't one of our friends. Not a family member. Whoever this guy was, he had been a major part of Sarah's trip. My grip tightened around my phone as I stared at his name, my mind spinning with possibilities. Was he a co-worker? A client? Someone she met at the hotel? I had no idea. But what I did know was that my wife had been in constant contact with him. She had packed lingerie for him. She had left me behind, thinking she could get away with it. The bathroom door creaked open, and I barely had time to lock my phone and shove it into my pocket before Sarah stepped into the bedroom, her damp hair clinging to her shoulders. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of guilt. "You okay?" she asked, her voice casual, but too forced. "You look pale." I forced a smile, ignoring the bile rising in my throat. "Yeah, just tired." She nodded, but her eyes lingered on me for just a second too long before she climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin like nothing had happened. I lay down beside her, staring at the ceiling, my mind reeling. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a second. Because I knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. And I was going to find out the whole damn truth. By the time the sun started creeping through the curtains, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to confront Sarah, not yet. If I came at her now, she'd just lie, twist the truth, or worse, gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. No, I needed to be smart about this. I needed solid proof, something so undeniable that she wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. So, I decided to play it cool. The next morning, Sarah acted like nothing had happened. She hummed as she made coffee in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone with that same easygoing smile. Watching her now, you'd think she didn't have a single worry in the world. But I had seen her panic last night. I had heard the fear in her voice. Over breakfast, I tried to ease into it. "So, any exciting stories from your trip?" I asked casually, stirring my coffee. For just a fraction of a second, she hesitated. Barely noticeable, but I caught it. She quickly recovered, flashing me that same easy smile. "Not really. It was mostly just work stuff, meetings, presentations, the usual. Nothing fun." I nodded, pretending to believe her. "Must have been exhausting." "It was," she said, glancing at her phone again. "But it was worth it. The client loved our pitch, and we might even close the deal next week." Her response was smooth. Too smooth. She was lying. I knew it. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I focused on the next step of my plan. After breakfast, she headed for the shower, leaving her phone on the counter. My heart pounded as I grabbed it. I only had seconds before she got out. Sarah had always been careless with her passcode. It was still our wedding date, ironic, considering what she had been up to. I quickly navigated to her messages. My hands trembled as I scrolled. And then, I found them. A long string of texts between her and Ethan Reynolds. My stomach dropped as I read through the messages. "Sarah, I can't stop thinking about this weekend. It was perfect. Ethan, you were perfect. I miss you already. Sarah, me too. I hate sneaking around, but it's worth it." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. This wasn't speculation anymore. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. I kept scrolling, each message worse than the last. There were photos, selfies of her in a hotel room, one of her in that black lingerie. I couldn't read anymore. My vision blurred as I locked her phone and put it back exactly where I found it. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. When she came out of the shower a few minutes later, I was already composed. I had to be. "I'm heading out for a bit," I said, grabbing my keys. "Need to run some errands." She barely looked up from her phone. "Okay, see you later." And just like that, I walked out the door, feeling like my whole life had just been rewritten. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I wasn't the kind of guy to let something like this slide. But I also wasn't impulsive. If I was going to confront her, I needed to do it right. I needed more than texts and a gut feeling. I needed evidence. So, I made a decision. I pulled into a quiet parking lot, took a deep breath, and called a private investigator. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd need one. But desperate times called for desperate measures. The guy I got in touch with, Jack, listened as I explained the situation. "I'll take the case," he said after a moment. "I'll need details, her schedule, anything about this guy, access to whatever you can provide. Emails, phone logs, social media, anything that helps." I told him everything I had, including the messages I had just seen that morning. Jack was efficient. He assured me he'd start digging immediately. "Give me a few days," he said. "I'll find out exactly what's going on." When I hung up, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, heartbreak, and a grim sense of determination. Sarah thought she could lie to me. That she could get away with this. She had no idea what was coming. For the next few days, I acted normal. I laughed at her jokes. I listened to her stories. I kissed her goodnight. All while knowing exactly what she had done. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I reminded myself that the truth was worth the wait. And then, one evening, my phone rang. "Jack, we've got something," he said, his voice serious. "You're going to want to see this." Jack didn't go into details over the phone. He just said he had something I needed to see and insisted we meet in person. I didn't argue. I made up an excuse about a last-minute work meeting, kissed Sarah on the cheek like everything was normal, and walked out the door. On the drive over, I tried to prepare myself. But no matter how much I braced for it, nothing could have readied me for what Jack was about to show me. He was already waiting when I arrived at the small diner on the edge of town, a manila folder sitting on the table in front of him. The second I saw it, my stomach twisted into knots. This was it. I slid into the booth across from him, my pulse pounding. "You're not going to like this," Jack said, his tone serious. "But you need to see it." He pushed the folder toward me. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first thing I saw was a series of photos. They were grainy, but clear enough that there was no denying what I was looking at. Sarah, laughing and leaning into a man I immediately recognized, Ethan Reynolds. They were sitting at a hotel bar, their body language unmistakably intimate. One photo showed Ethan with his hand on her thigh. Another showed them holding hands as they walked into an elevator. I felt like I was going to be sick. Jack wasn't done. He reached into the folder and pulled out a USB drive. "There's more on here," he said. "Surveillance footage from the hotel. It confirms everything." I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around the folder. "How long has this been going on?" I forced out. Jack hesitated. "From what I've gathered, a few months. They've been meeting up every time she travels for work." Months. She had been lying to my face for months. Every time she kissed me goodbye, every time she said she missed me while she was away, it was all a lie. I inhaled sharply, trying to keep my emotions in check. "What else did you find?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. Jack hesitated again. "There's one more thing." He pulled out another document and slid it across the table. I picked it up, my vision blurring as I read the words printed at the top. It was a booking confirmation. For a weekend getaway. Sarah and Ethan had already planned another trip. In 2 weeks. To a luxury resort in Miami. My hands clenched into fists. She wasn't just cheating on me. She wasn't even trying to stop. She had no remorse, no guilt. She was already planning her next rendezvous like I didn't even exist. The audacity of it made my blood boil. I exhaled slowly, forcing my anger back down. If I let my emotions get the best of me, I'd confront her now, and that's exactly what she'd want. She'd cry, twist the truth, and somehow make me doubt myself. No. I had to be smarter than that. I had to destroy her lies completely. I looked up at Jack, my expression steely. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You've done more than enough." Jack nodded, his face sympathetic. "If you need anything else, just call. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry you're going through this." I didn't respond. I just grabbed the folder, the USB drive, and walked out of the diner. The weight of what I now knew pressed down on me. But strangely, I also felt a sense of clarity. This was no longer about suspicions. I had cold, undeniable proof. And now, it was time to decide what to do with it. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, playing out every possible scenario, every confrontation, every argument, every excuse she might throw at me. But I wasn't going to let her weasel her way out of this. I had the proof. Sarah thought she was smart, thought she could get away with sneaking around behind my back, playing house with another man while keeping me as her safety net. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. I wasn't the kind of guy who would let this slide. I needed to be calculated, methodical. This wasn't just about confronting her, it was about exposing her lies in a way she couldn't deny. That meant gathering every piece of evidence, making sure I had backups, and setting up the perfect moment to bring it all crashing down on her. That night, I sat in a deserted parking lot and opened my laptop. I plugged in the USB drive and clicked on the hotel surveillance footage. The first clip showed Sarah and Ethan meeting in the lobby. The way she smiled at him, it wasn't just friendly. It was the way she used to smile at me. The next clip. Them at the bar together, laughing, touching. And then there was the elevator footage. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched them kiss just before the doors closed. I skipped ahead. The final clip showed the two of them entering a hotel room together. Late at night. They didn't come out until morning. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest heaving. I had seen enough. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see it with my own eyes. But now, I had everything I needed. The texts. The lingerie. The card. The hotel reservations. The surveillance footage. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was the truth. And Sarah was about to face it head-on. The next morning, I played it cool. I had to. If she sensed even the slightest shift in my demeanor, she'd get defensive. She might even try to cover her tracks, delete messages, spin a story before I had the chance to take control. So, I acted like everything was normal. I kissed her goodbye. I pretended I didn't know about Ethan. I let her believe she was still getting away with it. But behind the scenes, I was making moves. I backed up every piece of evidence to multiple places: my laptop, a hard drive, even a private email account. Then, I called a divorce attorney. His name was Alan, recommended by a coworker who had gone through something similar. He listened carefully as I laid out everything: Sarah's affair, the evidence, the upcoming trip to Miami. "With the proof you've got, this could be pretty straightforward," Alan said. "But what do you want out of this? Are you looking for a clean break, or do you want something more?" I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted revenge. To ruin Sarah the way she had ruined me. But another part of me just wanted to be done with it. "I want a clean break," I said finally. "But I won't let her walk away unscathed. She needs to take responsibility for what she's done." Alan nodded. "Fair enough. We'll start drafting the papers today. Do you have a place to stay for now?" I hesitated. The truth was, I hadn't figured that part out yet. But I'd manage. "Yeah," I said. "I'll figure it out." When I hung up, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time since this nightmare started, I was taking action. Sarah had been calling the shots for months. Now, I was the one in control. Later that evening, I decided to test the waters. As she scrolled through her phone on the couch, I casually brought up something from the past. "Hey, remember when we used to watch those true crime shows together?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She glanced up, smiling. "Yeah, those were fun." "Why?" "I was just thinking, it's interesting how people unravel mysteries, expose secrets, find out the truth even when people try to hide it." I let the words hang in the air, watching her reaction. Her smile faltered, just slightly. She shifted uncomfortably. "Sure, maybe we can watch one sometime," she said, her voice tight. That was all I needed to know. She was already nervous. And she didn't even know what was coming. The trap was set. The only thing left to do was spring it. The night I had been waiting for finally arrived. Sarah had no idea what was coming. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware that in a matter of minutes, her entire world was about to implode. I had spent the past few days perfecting my plan, gathering my evidence, backing up everything, making sure I left zero room for denial. She wasn't going to spin this. She wasn't going to lie her way out of it. I was about to expose everything. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, before walking over and sitting across from her. "Hey," I said, my voice calm but firm. "We need to talk." She looked up, surprised. "Oh, what's up?" I placed a manila folder on the coffee table between us. Her eyes flickered to it for a brief second. And I saw it. That tiny moment of fear. "What's that?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "Before I open it, I want to give you a chance," I said. "Is there anything you want to tell me, Sarah?" "Anything at all." Her face went pale. She swallowed. I don't know what you mean." I exhaled slowly. She was still going to lie. Even now, sitting at the edge of disaster, she was going to try to lie to my face. I shook my head. "All right, then." I flipped open the folder and slid the first photo across the table. It was of her and Ethan Reynolds at the hotel bar, laughing, leaning into each other. Her breath hitched. Before she could say anything, I slid the next photo. Ethan's hand on her thigh. Then the next. Them holding hands as they walked into an elevator together. Sarah's lips parted, but no words came out. She looked like she was going to be sick. But I wasn't done. I reached into the folder and pulled out a USB drive. "You might want to see this," I said coldly. "Security footage. From the hotel." She visibly flinched. I can explain," she started. I cut her off. "Oh, I'm sure you can," I said, my voice dripping with bitterness. "But before you do, maybe you'd like to explain this first." I tossed her own handwritten card onto the table. "For when we're finally alone." She stared at it. Her face turned ghostly white. I watched her crumble, watched the reality of the situation hit her all at once. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. I had spent too many sleepless nights questioning myself, doubting what I knew was real. Not anymore. Tell me, Sarah, I said, my voice deadly calm. How long were you planning to keep this up? Were you just waiting for me to find out? Or were you going to keep sneaking off to hotels with him while coming home to me like nothing happened? She burst into tears. I never stopped loving you, she sobbed. I was stupid. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I laughed bitterly. Oh, it just happened, huh? I said, shaking my head. You don't accidentally cheat on your husband for months, Sarah. You don't accidentally book a trip to Miami with another man. That takes planning. That takes deliberate choices. She buried her face in her hands, crying harder. I waited. I wanted to see if she'd own up to it. If she'd be honest, even now. Instead, she did exactly what I expected her to do. She begged. We can work through this, she sobbed. Please, please just give me a chance to make it right. I swear, I'll do anything. I stared at her, and I realized something. I didn't feel anything for her anymore. The woman sitting in front of me wasn't the same woman I married. I had already lost her a long time ago. I reached into the folder one last time and pulled out the divorce papers. Her face crumbled. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, please. I slid them across the table. It's over, Sarah, I said simply. Sign them. She stared at the papers like they physically hurt her. But I didn't care. I had spent months suffering in silence while she was out there living a double life. No. Now it was her turn to feel the pain of losing everything. I stood up, grabbing my keys. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight, I said. I need space to figure out my next steps. You can stay here, but don't expect things to go back to normal. This is the beginning of the end, Sarah. As I turned to leave, she reached for my hand, desperate. Please don't do this, she sobbed. I'll do anything. Anything, just don't leave. I paused at the door. Then, I turned back to look at her one last time. You already left, I said quietly. The moment you chose him over me. And with that, I walked out. I drove for hours, aimlessly, angry, heartbroken, but strangely, free. For the first time in months, I felt free. The next morning, I met with Alan, my divorce attorney. I want a clean break, I told him. But I want her to take responsibility for what she's done. He nodded. With the proof you've got, that shouldn't be a problem. And just like that, I took the first step toward my new life. In the weeks that followed, everything fell apart for Sarah. Ethan's wife found out about the affair, and unlike me, she didn't handle it quietly. She went public. The fallout was brutal. Sarah and Ethan's reputations were shattered. The affair wasn't just a secret between the four of us anymore. It became everyone's business. And honestly, I didn't feel 1 ounce of sympathy. Sarah made her bed. And now, she had to lie in it. As for me, I moved forward. At first, it wasn't easy. There were moments when the pain crept back in. But each day, it got a little easier. One evening, a few months later, I found myself sitting in a coffee shop, reading a book. And that's when I met Rachel. She was sitting at the table next to mine, struggling to balance her coffee cup and laptop. I chuckled. Need a hand? She looked up, laughing. Thanks. I swear, I'm usually more coordinated than this. We started talking. Before I knew it, hours had passed. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt hope. Sarah's betrayal had hurt me. But it hadn't broken me. I was stronger now. And as I walked out of that coffee shop, I knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning of something better. And I was ready for it. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.